Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. So before we jump in and we introduce ourselves, I wanted to start, hold on, can we mute this? There we go. I wanted to start with something fun. So this is my first WOLFcon. I want to start a new tradition. I'm going to teach everybody here so that later on at lunch, I'm going to do the same thing and you all know what to do. So it goes like this. I'm going to say, can I get a howl? And then I want to hear your best howls. Okay? Okay? Are you ready? Thank you so much. Okay, so later on, you can do it. You can hear me do it. If you hear it, please give me a howl. Thank you. So today we're here to talk to you about BibFrame in FOLIO. So I'm going to let Anwar introduce himself.
I think I have
Okay.
a microphone. Can you hear me? Is it good? Yeah, now it's much better. Well, hello everyone, and welcome. I hope you will enjoy our presentation. We will talk about BIBFRAME and linked data today. I'm pretty sure it will be exciting. But let me move to another slide. Just a couple of words about speakers. That's going to be me. My name is Anwar, and I'm a solution architect from EPAM, and we're working together with EBSCO to enable this great capability in FOLIO.
And my name is Gloria Gonzalez. I am the product manager for Linked Data Innovation and Design at EBSCO. So I've been focusing on bringing linked data to FOLIO together with the Library of Congress. And we're joined by Vince as well. But I think that everybody knows Vince. And if you don't, you should. So we're going to leave him as a man of mystery if you don't already know him. But we're happy to be talking to you today together.
Yep. Let's move on. Just a couple of words about our agenda. We will start from the introduction, but I'm pretty sure that majority of people here know something about BIBFRAME. Just raise your hand if you know it. Okay. Our assumption was right. After that, we'll go to a part where we want to explain what kind of things we can consider as good features for FOLIO in terms of BIBFRAME. And the next part will be about linked data architecture in FOLIO, where I will explain what kind of changes we want to introduce and how they will impact FOLIO architecture. And the last part, I think, will be the most interesting. You will understand how BIBFRAME can benefit FOLIO in future and what kind of advantages we will get because of BIBFRAME. Let's begin with the first part. It's introduction, and it's about MARC, inventory, and our road to BIBFRAME.
So considering how many people raise their hands, I know I'm going to be preaching to the choir when I talk about the limitations of MARC. We all know how old the MARC standard is, but what's really important to know in this context is that it was created long before the web. And so what this means is that we're in a world where we have many different siloed databases. It's hard to connect things between them. The MARC standard is also ridiculously redundant. So even if you look in one single record, we're saying the same thing many different times. And then libraries are also redoing work consistently over and over and over. So there's redundancy of work across institutions, as well as a lot of redundancy of the data within the records themselves. It's also a very complex and ambiguous standard. That's why many of us have degrees where we learned how to work with it. And I've found that when working with people who aren't librarians, especially developers, it can be difficult for them to understand MARC, all of the nuanced rules, how we've extended it for specific systems and with local fields. So it's a lot for people to take on. It also has extremely limited interoperability. So it makes data flowing between library systems difficult, but it also means that we're in an industry that's not able to send data easily to other places without a heavy amount of processing and pipelines built on the other side to receive that data. So with FOLIO, you all have already started to address this issue with the inventory model. So that's why I'm so excited to work with this system, because it was really designed to be more format agnostic. So with the inventory model, you've already started to take the first steps to break away from the MARC standard. Now, we can also do better. So with BibFrame, we can express more relationships and explain how things are connected. And with our data in this format, we can ask better questions, not just about the data within one library catalog, but the data across catalogs. You can see how many times one person was mentioned in a consortia of libraries, for example. And so with this more advanced expression of everything that libraries describe, you can talk about not just the instances, holdings, and items and those relationships, but you can talk about the topics, the places, and the people that you all describe.
Yeah, I guess you got a lot of points about the current state, about MARC format and the inventory. What we're gonna do right now, we're going to ask just one simple question. Everybody understands and everybody knows that FOLIO lives and works well without BibFrame. And the question you might have, why do we need BibFrame in this case? And let's start from this simple diagram. I want to say that's not something that explains everything about FOLIO. It's a simplified version, and the version which shows what we need exactly for this presentation. I would like you to have a look at yellow boxes where we have two applications, inventory application and MARC editor application. What else we have? We have corresponding modules which provide business API, business functionality for those applications. And at the bottom, we have storages which store data, which have data, and we can manipulate and use this data in all of the workflows we have. Actually, it works well, but we also understand that there are some things which we can do better. And the first one, yeah, we know that every time when we want to add a new format, for example, Unimark or Dublin-Core, it requires some changes. It requires some additional effort from developers, from architects to analyze how properly develop such things. There is another thing. We know that everything what we have right now in FOLIO cannot be considered as linked data. We know that we have data. Yeah, maybe we can say that there are some things about links, references, but we cannot say something like that covers everything about linked data world. And here's another thing. We know that the current version doesn't provide a good way to exchange data, to provide data for other ILS systems and for other systems. Just imagine another system will want to use something what we have, how they can do this. And actually what we want to do, we want to answer how Linked Data and BibFrame project will help us to have this capability in the future. What I want to say, imagine if we introduce a new concept, if we introduce linked data idea in FOLIO. We have on the left side everything what I explained before, but we'll have just one more capability, one more feature, let's say. And here's a diagram which shows everything from high level and business perspective. I would like Gloria to help me here.
Yeah, so I keep turning this off. Okay, can you hear me? What about this? Okay. There we go. You can see my mouse. Okay, so I don't have a fun name for this diagram yet. Would love to hear your ideas. There's a lot of, it's like a bowl of noodles maybe. So up here in the top right corner is everything that you're familiar with in FOLIO already today. And in the bottom part of this diagram, which was an early proposal that we shared with the Library of Congress, you'll see a few new things. So in this box here, we have what we call an ETL pipeline. So that's where we can take in data of any type, especially MARC, and we can use rules to go find all the people, places, topics, works, instances, and items, and we can mint identifiers for those things, and those are URIs. We can also do really advanced reconciliation so that every time we come across the same person, the same link is generated. And so all those links are connected, and what you end up with is a set of data that can be loaded into graph storage. So from the ETL pipeline, we can load data here, but this isn't a separate database. It's actually like a parallel schema in the inventory database that can take advantages of the benefits of the relational database, but it also has a graph data model on top of that. From there, we can send data into inventory via APIs that we're building now, but you can also export data for other purposes. As you heard Caitlin say at the beginning when she kicked off the conference, the Library of Congress is dedicated to providing high quality MARC as long as it's needed. And so through this export mechanism, we can also go from the graph back to MARC to send that data. The main places that we're focusing on sending data first, which aren't pictured on this diagram, are locate as well as the Library of Congress's graph at id.loc.gov. So libraries can share their data publicly that way. They can also syndicate it through feeds, which help you connect the data to other apps. So down here on top of the graph data storage, you see two things. One is the editor, which we call Marva, because we're adapting the Marva editor that was built by the Library of Congress. And then you also see the data viewer. So we're now calling that the Graph Explorer, and that will give libraries the experience of navigating their data inside Folio so they can look at their graph and decide what they need to edit and update. The only thing I'll add here is while we are focused on bringing in MARC through the ETL pipeline, it's generalized. So you could adapt it for JSON, for any XML schema, for CSV. So there's a lot of potential for growth to other formats with this approach that we proposed.
Yep, thank you, Gloria. What we're gonna do next, we're going to go into each component and understand how it will work and what kind of things we'll have because of those components. Yeah, that's a high-level, again, view, which explains what kind of new components we'll have in Folio. And actually, again, it doesn't show everything because Folio is much bigger and we have a lot of other components. But what I want to show here, we'll have two new applications. The first one is a Marva editor. It's in green box, you can find it, I hope. And we also have Graph Explorer application. Of course, we'll have some new application models, I mean, microservices, which will provide API for these applications. And we will have the storage, I mean, the schema, which will have data, linked data. And finally, we can enable some other flows explained on the previous slide. Let's start from the storage. I think the idea is pretty simple. We want to introduce a new place where we will have our BIBFRAME records. And those BIBFRAME records will be replicated from other storages. What I mean here, I mean, we have records, but we want to copy them and save in the new format. So everything what we have right now, everything what we have in the database will be available in the new applications. There are some other points. I think I can explain them later on the next slides. But right now, it's important to understand that we'll have a new place with BIBFRAME records, and those BIBFRAME records can be used for everything what we plan in terms new flows, new capabilities, and new applications. Another thing is the Marva editor. I'm pretty sure we have some other topics. We have some other sessions where people will explain what exactly we'll have in the Marva editor. But I want to just highlight our goal is to enable a new way of working with data. We have BIBFRAME format, and it means that we should have a new approach. And this approach means something new. It's new concept, it's new idea, let's say. And finally, we could manage our records, we could create new records, and we can find existing records in the database. What we're gonna do, we're going to introduce a library. Actually, the Marva editor is already a library, but we are working on a new version which will be based on React. And this version will be used in Folio, but potentially we can use it in many other places. We can use it outside of Folio. We can use it maybe somewhere else. And the goal here is to allow everyone to contribute. And the Library of Congress will be our partner here. And we will be working on this new version to enable this Marv editor capability for Folio and potentially for other users. Yeah, that's how it looks right now. I understand it's quite ugly, but it's a first version, it's a draft version. We are going to work in UX direction. We are going to get some wireframes, sketches, and finally, this one will become much better. And I think we will be able to answer all of the things and features our end users wants to have. What else? I think it's quite clear. We can find a record. We can open this record. We can manage this record. But we mentioned a couple of times that our goal is to enable data graph. And what we want our records to be linked to each other. If we have one record, we want to understand how it works with other records. And idea here is to introduce a new application. Actually, we will be using some of the existing implementations. I think we can cover it later. But we will have the application, and this application will provide something like this. Again, it's a draft version. Later on, we will have potentially another UI, another design. But yeah, the concept is the same. We can find our records, we can find our resources, we can use different types of filters, we can use different types of searches. For example, if we want to find all of the instance items, instance entities, or items entities, or work entities, we can do this here on the left screen. We can open this record, we maybe can find something else, and finally we will go to the Marv editor. Yeah, I think I covered everything about the flow where we want to find a record, where we want to edit this record and maybe introduce some changes. But what about the data we have right now? I think we have millions of records, we have a lot of data. Every library has a lot of data. What we're gonna do? We are going to provide a way to transform data from one format to another. Right now, we have everything in Mark format. And finally, at the end, we should have everything in BIBFRAME format. And that's the idea. This is our pipeline implementation. Again, this is high level. But what I want to show here, we have data, and actually we can reuse existing capabilities. For example, data expert. We can grab data, we can provide it for our pipeline, and the pipeline will transform everything and finally will save in the database. Yeah, frankly, here we want to use some of the existing components available from Zephyra, and we will extend them, of course, because everything what we have right now doesn't cover our needs and our requirements. But finally, yeah, we will have some level of extension, and one day it will become open source too, which means that everyone can use it for their needs. Another thing I believe is important to cover right now in the scope of this session, I think everybody understands how our people from libraries work right now. They use the inventory application, they go there, they find something, and finally they go to manage this record. They can go to the Mark editors, maybe they can use some other applications. But once we introduce our linked data concept, once we have Marv editor application, we will have two options. One more option, let's say it in this way. What it means, our end users, they will have an option to use the inventory application where they can find a record and do something, but they will have another way. They can go to the Graph Explorer or the Marv editor and do their job there. I mean, everything. Manage record, create record, find a record. I think everything will be covered in the scope of this flow. How it will work under the hood? I'm pretty sure you know that we have a lot of data. We have data in Mark format, but we should support two flows. And if someone does some changes in the Marv editor, we should be sure that the changes are available in other editors. I mean, we can find them. Under the hood, we're going to link our data, and actually we already have some connections between Mark records and the inventory application. And for the linked data, we want to use the same concept. In our ETL pipeline, we will be copying some identifiers, which means that we can refer to the inventory application. And if we want to switch from one flow to another, it will be possible. Yeah, maybe something where we get closer to our section where we explain everything one more time, how BIBFRAME can benefit FOLIO in future. I will start here and Gloria will help me later. So the goal here is to have something where we have our records linked to each other. For example, we have instances, they can share the same work element, the same work entity. And just in case if they have something in common, for example, agents, again, they can share it. That's a great feature, which will enable a lot of new flows for our end users. And yeah, of course, our editors, our graph explorers will provide a way to find those records, manage those records, and do something later.
Yeah, so I'll just add that the redundancy I talked about in Mark becomes much more bearable in a BibFrame world because you're describing a work, for example, and you update that description. It will update everywhere that connects to that work. You're just updating the BibFrame resource once. And then if you're making or breaking a connection, you can add automation on top of that as well. So you can have opportunity for less manual work, but editing becomes much more natural, and we don't have to worry about going to every single record that mentions a work, for example, and updating that separately. Instead, we can update the one BibFrame resource and then watch that update perpetuate across the system.
What else? Another thing which we believe will be so useful for FOLIO. Right now we have one single source of truth. Let's say we have several storages, but one day we will have another storage. We'll have another place where we have our BIBFRAME records, and we can use this place to export data into other formats. For example, if we want something in Dublin Core, Unimark, any other formats, we can use this storage as a source of truth. We can get data from BIBFRAME storage, we can transform it and save it in the format we need. Actually, it will help us to remove some kind of burden of working and supporting many formats. We will not to have, I mean, we want to have anything like many formats stored in the database and having anything like data export from one part to another. Everything will work out of the box for this new type of storage. And maybe another great feature, which I think we should highlight, it's how our catalogers will be able to use FOLIO. I mentioned this a couple of times. We'll have one flow. We'll already have one flow where they can use inventory application, but they will have the Marva editor and they can choose. Yeah, maybe it's going to be a journey. I mean, it will take some time to switch from one way of working to another. But what we want to introduce, we want to introduce new way of thinking. I hope that this new editor will provide some new capabilities, some new features, and people sometime after will understand how it works and what kind of great stuff they can get from it. Yeah.
So I'll just add something here, which is I'd like to give a shout out to Matt Miller, who's in the audience, and he's the main developer of Marva at the Library of Congress. So he's giving a lightning talk this afternoon, which you're all welcome to join to learn more about Marva. But what's great about this approach of adapting Marva is that we're building on all of this iteration that the Library of Congress has already done and all the lessons that they've learned along their journey of adopting BibFrame. And so what Matt did at the beginning of this project was give us a really slimmed down, optimized version of Marva, which is called Quartz. It's on GitHub. You're all welcome to look at that. But it helped us kind of get a head start on what we needed for FOLIO. So thank you to Matt, and you can hear more from him this afternoon.
Yeah, maybe the last slide here. I understand that you already could notice that we don't have some components which I showed in the beginning of my presentation. We don't have some storages. We don't have maybe some other things which you could see before. But what we're gonna show here, we want to explain and highlight one more time that potentially in future we can have another single source of truth, and linked data and BIBFRAME can become this single source of truth. And actually, yeah, if we go into details, we can use it for the data expert, we can use it maybe for some other flows, and it will help us to reduce the amount of time we spend to support working with other types of formats. And just in case if we need a new format, we can count on this new storage, we can count on the data we have in this place. So that's the last thing, and I believe we should summarize everything one more time. Here's a diagram which shows everything from high-level perspective. And maybe I will just say, again, we have a new concept, we have linked data storage, we have some new applications which will be connected to this storage, which will provide new ways of working with data. We can edit data, we can create new records, we'll have Graph Explorer where we can find records. And yeah, of course, it should work and coexist with the existing flows. For example, the inventory application will work with the Marv editor, and Marv editor will be working together with the inventory. We cannot make it in another way. Yeah, something about ETL I have explained before. There are some development which is in progress. We're trying to figure out what works best for us, what kind of maybe adjustments we'll have to introduce because of new fields and maybe some additional requirements which can come up because of profiles, BIBFRAME profiles. But again, one day it will become open source and everyone can use it for their needs. And just in case if you want to transform data from MARC format to BIBFRAME format, you have it. I think that's pretty much it about, yeah, if you want to.
Yeah. So I'll just add that you can kind of think of this like we're building you a table, but it's up to you to decide what you want to eat at that table, how you want to serve things. So we're giving you a foundation that you can build on. So the Q release will be the first release that includes some of this functionality. And then a year from now, we will be in a very different place and have much more to show you. But what you can expect when this exists is the ability to create, edit, and share linked data for any purpose to any system, to improve discovery, to bring new people into the catalog, to do things that we haven't thought of yet. So I'm excited to hear more from you and see what you all do when you get a chance to use the work that we're doing with the Library of Congress.
And just want to add a couple of words how this relates to FOLIO. And I think Anwar made a reference to single source of truth, and there is great potential with this initiative to help solve some fundamental problems in FOLIO. As I've mentioned in other presentations, we have always wanted to do agnostic data formats for FOLIO, but we've, for practical reasons, focused on MARC implementation. We always still have the notion that we can get there eventually and support different formats in FOLIO. But the way FOLIO is structured currently, that means that if we add a new format, and for every new format that we add, it is tremendous heavy lifting. We have to add support for the format in many different places. We have to change our source record storage. We have to change our data import, our data export, our inventory, and it goes like this for every new format. The beauty of this approach is that we have a graph storage, and it represents sort of a centralized source of truth. Pipelines that take in multiple formats converge to the source of truth, export in many different formats. If we could then make use of that within FOLIO, it would help us solve that problem of multi-format. Of course, there's going to be sort of a paradigm shift, because the concern is always the round trip problem. So the challenge is going to be able to take in a MARC record, deconstruct it into the graph, and then reconstruct it on demand back into a format that is as identical as possible as the original. But it offers a great, opportunity for the FOLIO as a platform.
Yes,
All right.
I think that's it.
Yeah, do we have any questions? I'll check chat. Do we have any questions from the audience? I see Charlotte in the front row. Let me come. Give you the mic.
I just want to follow up on what you just explained, Vince. So, because originally we also then in some of the early conceptual data models, we envisioned that source record storage was to be this multi-formatted source of truth. But now we are thinking that source record storage should not have that role, and we will use the new data graph storage instead.
That is basically the longer term vision, because that's the path that gives us the greatest opportunity, and let's take advantage of it.
For those on Zoom, this is Laura Daniels. I'm really, really excited about this work, and the fact that we're actively finally moving away from being so MARC-based in Folio. This is moving toward the vision so many of us had in the beginning. So thank you for this. I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding. It looked to me like, at least in the first stage, we'd be converting our linked data to MARC in SRS in order to populate inventory. Am I understanding that correctly? And if so, why would we turn anything into MARC if we don't have to?
So you don't have to. You can send data directly from the graph to inventory. So if you want to drop, whenever you're ready to drop your MARC SRS, you can do that. There will be an initial migration period where you transform the bulk of your data, you do quality analysis, you run some jobs to fix some things, and then once you're ready, you can let go of MARC SRS. We also have, on a small level, the ability to hop from BibFrame to MARC. So if you are in a phase where you're moving that direction and you still have MARC SRS, you will always be able to create BibFrame, click a button, and then open that data in MARC.
What I envision is we'll need to still be ingesting a lot of MARC, but my hope would be we could convert that from MARC to BibFrame and then put that in inventory. Is that correct?
Maybe I can also step in here and explain. Actually, what we'll have two flows. The first one is for the historical data. That's what I explained before. But another one, when we have new records created in, let's say, inventory or existing MARC editor, we will send them to our new storage. I mean, we'll have them in the new format as well. And it will work in two directions. Whenever we have a new record created in linked data format, it will be available in other applications. So I think if you have some worries about new records, they will have their copy in a new storage as well. So you can switch from one application to another. You can use, the version you prefer. I mean, the MARC editor or the MARV editor. I think it's up to you.
Just to make sure, the relationship between BibFrame records and existing MARC records and inventory records. You've already talked about it, but I didn't quite catch the idea. I mean, we know currently we have only inventory and MARC records, and there is a specific relationship between MARC record and inventory records. So MARC record cannot live without corresponding record in inventory. How about BibFrame record? Can BibFrame record live without corresponding MARC record, or or what would be the relationship, in fact?
Yeah, actually, we have two stages here. The first one is our upcoming implementation, something like a long-term vision. In upcoming time, we will have this link between our records. So if we have a record created in linked data format, we'll have corresponding records in the inventory, and they will need to coexist, because that's what I explained before. If we want to switch from one mode to another, we should have technical background, we should have technical capability for this. So yeah, we will have it definitely. But we have another vision in long term. I think we can switch to an approach where we have BIBFRAME records, and MARC records will be considered something like additional format if we need it. I think Vince might help here a lot. Yeah, I think.
There's another question up here. You're gonna make me run back?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can do this
Okay.
after, yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay, we'll switch.
Okay, so I can try and clarify, but I think Anwar touched on the key points. We have, and to some extent, it's implementation choices which haven't been made yet for how we make the linkage, but we have a mechanism now in FOLIO where when records are stored in inventory, and they can be created in inventory, or they can be created with a source of MARC, which is the connection to the MARC record that sits in SRS. So I would imagine that one particular implementation here is to basically make a representation of the BibFrame records in a first phase, and introduce a concept of source equals BibFrame or source equals linked data that provides the connection back to the linked data storage. So, and why you want to do that is because of that flow and that other diagram, when you know how you get to your records. The search engine in FOLIO depends on inventory records. So if you want to approach the record through inventory, you go through the search engine, and the records have to have some sort of a footprint in it, inventory. And then if the type is flagged as linked data or BibFrame, then it would give you a path back to the storage in linked data.
Are there any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
This time. Not sure who was first here, but.
Hi. Hi, thank you for your wonderful work. My question is, how will we be able to manage our linked data parameters?
Well, thank you.
So it depends on what type of parameters you'd like to change. So with Marva, if you're not familiar, it uses profiles. So that's a file you can create that chooses specifically which linked data classes and properties you want to use to describe your data. So right now we're working with all of the profiles that the Library of Congress has created, starting first with monographs, but profiles are totally plug and play. So it'd be great if you want to use other vocabularies or ontologies or something that's not already in those profiles, if you had the opportunity to do that yourself. So not in the next year, but about a year from now, we'll also be starting work on a profile marketplace. So that if you wanted to create a profile that worked for you in Chile, you could do that and share that with all the other libraries in your region, and they could reuse that same profile.
Thank you.
Okay, there's some online questions you dig up. Why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Thank you. Great work, really exciting. Two-part question. Have you got any advice for app developers so that we can prepare? I know we can't use your work now, but if we think about work we could do now to prepare apps for coming forward, this coming forward, is there any advice, or is there anything we can do as app developers to prepare for this? And the second part of the question, thinking specifically about ERM and agreements, and also about ILL, those apps need to make assertions about resources which possibly aren't in inventory yet. Is there a way we can get those into the linked data store so that we can make assertions about them, even though they might not be in inventory?
Yeah. So my advice would be in November, we're going to release some of this functionality to test FOLIO environments. So for a few people who have sandboxes and have volunteered to give feedback. So if you're an app developer and you want to give feedback this fall, let us know and we can show you what we've worked on and give you example data. And then separately, the mappings and data modeling that we're doing for this work will be available on GitHub. So we've been working with the subject matter experts at the Library of Congress, and we'll be sharing that work publicly. So you'll see that in about a month come online, and you can start seeing the model and giving feedback on the approach.
Hello. I apologize in the case that you maybe already explained it. I guess this is all about title data. So did you already think about or have plans or ideas about using this for item data or even more important authority data to integrate it into the library system?
So right now, authorities are not the top priority for the Library of Congress because there are external dependencies. So we have NACO and other entities that we depend on. So it's up to libraries who are already participating in those organizations to help push those forward. But at the same time, we're putting that leg on the table so that when you're ready to start editing authorities, that work will be there. And Kalila has done an amazing job of setting up the way that authority linking works in MARC today, so that we can reuse all of the identifiers that you are populating in the subfield 0 to help improve your data in graph form.
And item data?
Oh, yes, item data. So right now we're primarily focused on transforming bibliographic records, but that pipeline can be extended for any data set. So we're going to continue to rely on inventory to manage item data, but if we needed to look at holdings records from the same type of perspective, we can. I'm not sure, you might have mentioned messy data briefly, but I will say that we have done a lot of this transformation from MARC to BibFrame. I've done it for thousands of libraries. And the biggest thing that prevents people from jumping in and getting started is thinking like their data needs to be perfect, or there's so much cleanup work that needs to be done before you start. And that's not true at all. The libraries have the best data that the web has seen. It's highly curated. And so as part of the ETL pipeline, we also have normalization and optimization, so you can deal with punctuation or any inconsistencies in your data along the way.
I think we have some hands up on this side. Did you want to look up the online questions? I think somebody can.
Yes. So we have one question. What release of FOLIO works with the Marva editor? So the first version of the Marva will be available in the Q release, Kesnelia, which is scheduled for spring 2024. Okay, so Molly asks, hey Molly, Molly asks, will the link between linked data and the SRS records be similar to the existing 999F implementation, where the subfield I contains the instance UUID and the subfield S contains the SRS version of the UUID? So yeah, this is a similar approach, except we will not be using subfields. So the link will not have a traditional subfield like we use with MARC. Instead, it will have a predicate that relationship will then connect back to the SRS ID.
Yeah, maybe from technical perspective, if I understand this question correctly, what we're going to have, we're going to copy some identifiers from SRS storage into our linked data storage. So finally, we'll have a way to find MARC records, we can find the inventory records, and actually it's going to be, yeah, pretty similar approach. Potentially we might have some difference. I think we will understand it soon, but yeah, that's what we plan at least. That looks like the reason. Okay. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Maybe we have some questions or comments in the room.
Yeah, hi. So I have some questions spinning in my head around connections, links, and constraints or dependencies, but I'm not really ready to articulate, so I want to reach out to you later. But one question would be around export. So when you have something in the linked data storage and you want to export it to any other format like MARC, so let's say you have a Pika format. Would that be an option? So could you write your own conversion tables using some kind of standard language, or how would that work?
Yeah, I think eventually we'll have an option where someone can provide some kind of rules for a transformation process where we can just get data and transform it to some formats. But what I understand in the beginning, we'll have a way to transform data into the formats we need most. I mean, most probably it's going to be Mark first and some other formats which will be important for FOLIO. If I answered your question. Yeah. Okay.
All right. If there's no more questions, I have one. Can I get a help? Thank you. I appreciate everyone joining us today. And thank you to Anwar, who came all the way from Kazakhstan. So thank you. Yes, we'll attach our slides to the presentation in Sketch. And then if you have any follow-up questions, you can get in touch with our contact information there. Great. Thank you so much.